We're back, joined by my colleague and friend at the Center for Security Policy, our Executive Vice President, the co-founder and Senior Director of Communications at the Warrior Legacy Foundation, a former U.S. Army Special Forces weapons sergeant, who has conducted counterinsurgency, counter-narcotics, and counter-terrorism missions and training in more than 24 countries around the world, a man of considerable experience and expertise who we prize, as a matter of fact, at the Center. Jim Hanson. Jim, welcome. It's good to have you as always.
Yeah, Frank, good to be here.
You have been following closely, Jim, of course, the developments in the sort of Iraq, Syria, now Turkish theater. There have been reports of, intensifying activities, particularly by the Turks, as well as they're allowing us to make use for the first time in quite some time of their Incirlik air base. First of all, sort of set the stage for us, if you would. Remind us what's going on there on the ground and what interests the Turks have in projecting power into, notably, Syria.
Yeah, Frank, that's been the interesting piece. The Turks have kind of stayed out of this, and consequently, they've kept us from being as effective as we might have been, given that they're a supposed ally, because Incirlik Air Base in Turkey is the closest place where there are U.S. Air Force facilities to launch raids from. And they had refused to let us use that. And consequently, we've been flying a lot farther and having to do much more intense logistical operations, even to operate in the theater. So when the Turks allowed us to do that, that was a major concession from them. The interesting piece is it was not a noble gesture because they decided that they wanted to be good friends. It appears to me that the reason they did it was a deal they struck. We get the use of Incirlik, and they get to conduct some operations against the Kurds in northern Syria and in Iraq that they don't like, that they have problems with. So they claim to be helping us in the war on ISIS, and I think as much as they're doing there, which is little, they're doing quite a bit more to damage the Kurds that they have a beef with in their border regions. So I don't know that was a major coup for us as much as it might have sounded.
And Jim, you have been recommending for some time now that we ought to be actually regarding the Kurds as a major new factor in the effort to counter, on the one hand, the Islamic State and deal with the unraveling situation in Iraq by, among other things, actually arming the Kurds. Are those different Kurds than the ones that the Turks are attacking right now, or are they really all part of more or less an emerging Kurdish nation in that part of the world?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Frank. If you ask the Turks, they would say they're bombing the bad Kurds. And to some extent, there's a legitimate claim there. The PKK, who is the main group they're targeting, has been listed as a terrorist entity, and they've done some heinous things. But the Kurds, as you mentioned, consider themselves to be a nation state. They operate that way inside Iraq. Iraqi Kurdistan is a nation state in all but name. And I think the Turks are rightly worried that one of the end results of the chaos that's going on in the region is that there will be a greater Kurdistan, which encompasses parts of Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And I think from the U.S. perspective, they are an ally that we have had friendly relations with and done a lot with over decades at this point. So if there was one group in that region we should be fully supporting and making sure had the weapons they need to defend themselves, it would be the Kurds. And yet, once again, President Obama has sided with a more Islamist organization or state, in this case, that being Turkey, than with an actual friend. And that's going to bite us in the long run.
And as best I can tell, Jim Hanson, there's been no deviation from the administration's view that they will not provide arms to the Kurds, at least directly. They insist on going through Baghdad, which seems not to get them on to the to the Kurds in any appreciably
somehow
number.
They don't make it there.
Yeah. And what are the implications, again, of that, particularly the Iranian element of what's happening in the Shia areas of Iran?
Well, now that President Obama has determined that Iran is a great partner for peace, they can be trusted not to build nuclear weapons, and essentially he's asked them in some way, shape, or form to become a leader in the counter-ISIS operations, they're moving in and they are taking control, and they're actually going to hit the Kurds as well. They will take some actions against ISIS, but the bigger problem is that the Iranian forces are Shia. The Iranian-backed militias, who are the bulk of the shock troops who are going to be operating against ISIS, are Shia and bad, nasty, sectarian atrocity-style Shia, and so are the government of Baghdad troops. So you've got a large Shia force moving into majority Sunni areas, which is where the ISIS strongholds are. And you've got a huge possibility, not just for sectarian atrocities, which are already happening, but for the possibility of a larger civil war brewing because of this fact when the rest of the Gulf Arabs, who are mostly Sunni, see their cousins in some way, shape, or form being slaughtered. So Iran is going to be a bigger problem in this just because of the fact that now Obama has empowered them and legitimized them, and that's not a good thing for anyone. And funded them, not all of which they use for bad.
Yeah, indeed. Jim, going back to the Turks and the U.S. play in Syria, there's now talk of a safe zone being created in which these refugees can shelter free from predations by the Islamic State. But it's a little unclear how that works, if at all, given what you're talking about in terms of Turkish operations against some of the people who live in those areas as well, notably some of these Kurdish forces.
Well, it's one of those things that, again, that sounds great on the surface. Oh, we'll create a safe zone. It will be an ISIS-free zone. We'll make sure refugees can go there. The moderate Syrians can hang out there. All of those would be good things if the people who the Turks want to administer that safe zone, the Syrians that they think would be good to help there, weren't affiliated with Al-Qaeda. So, the guys they want to run the safe zone, aside from themselves, are bad guys. They don't actually want to do much in the way of fighting ISIS, because if they get too involved in that, ISIS may start crossing their border and blowing up more things inside Turkey. They don't want that, so they're not really going to do as much against ISIS as they're claiming. The safe zone, if it is safe at all, is going to be safe for Al-Qaeda and other extremists. And to the extent that NATO blesses this, we're all just going to look silly in the end.
I think you're right. It's going to be a real dog's breakfast. Again, our guest is Jim Hanson, a former U.S. Army Special Forces sergeant and now the Executive Vice President of the Center for Security Policy. Jim, let me ask you about one other question. The news reports today indicate that Mullah Omar, longtime leader and driving force behind another of these Islamist operations, the Taliban, has passed away, by some accounts maybe as long as 2 or 3 years ago. As of our conversation, the Taliban have not confirmed that and have, in the intervening period, I think, attributed to him from time to time a statement or a position or something. Do you credit this, and what would the implications be if, in fact, this preeminent figure among this hostile group had indeed gone on to his great reward, whatever that might be?
Yeah, I don't know what reward it would be. Frank, it's hard to tell. You want to talk about opaque groups. The Taliban has been pretty good at keeping us in the dark as to who is alive, who is dead. And by doing just what you said, they'll attribute statements to people who may no longer be on the earthly plane. If he's dead, it's good because he was a charismatic figure, he was beloved, and he garnered a lot of respect among some very disparate elements. I would prefer to get a little bit more definitive answer and have the Taliban actually admit it. But the bottom line is it's a bonus for the region, because anytime you lose a major leader, it makes it tougher to keep those coalitions together.
Yeah, especially an outfit like the Taliban, which is at the moment salivating, I think, at the prospect that we're going to cut and run in Afghanistan. Jim Hanson, thank you for staying the course with us. As always, it's great to have you with us, and I appreciate all the work you do for us at the Center for Security Policy. Keep it up. I hope the rest of you will keep it up as well. Come back to us again tomorrow. Same time, same station. Until then, this is Frank Gaffney. Thanks for listening.